Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversations About Color. So excited to have you all joining us today and to have an amazing guest. Can't wait for you to meet her. You may already know her because she's pretty famous, but I can't wait for you to hear from her and I can't wait to speak to her about her life and her experiences. So as always, as you're coming in, give us a hello, give us a wave, let us know that you're here. If you have any questions for us specifically, put them in the question box. We will try to get through all of your questions. And if you have any comments, let us know as well. Hi, Claudia, how are you? And let me go ahead and get our guest on here. Hi, Jamie. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you as well. I'm so glad our schedules worked out.
Yes, I know it takes a bit of a miracle to do that,
Yeah.
but I'm so glad.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. I know you've got a crazy schedule too, and we've got so many people that are waving hello. Hi, everyone.
It's my first Instagram live, so I feel very
Yay!
honored. Thank you.
And you are like a pro. Look at you. You got set up. Most people are like, wait, where do I put this? You're amazing. You're
Yeah,
natural.
I know that light is key. So
Yes.
if nothing else, at least I know that I need some light. So it was good. Thank you again for
Awesome.
having me.
Awesome.
This is great.
No, I'm so excited that you're here. So before we get started, I wanted to actually read a formal, intro. I want people to know people that may not know you so that they can hear exactly all the amazing things that you do. So Dr. Jamie Coleman is an acute care surgeon specializing in trauma, emergency general surgery, and surgical critical care. She is also a medical media expert, public speaker, and avid writer. She and her work have been featured in Forbes, Huffington Post, Glamour Magazine, U.S. News and World Report. She's also the wife of an NFL player turned lawyer, mom to two young boys, and you may have seen her recently on Good Morning America discussing anti-racism and how it is important in her life. Jamie, thank you so much for being here again.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. What you do is so important. And
Oh.
these kinds of conversations are so important now more than ever.
Absolutely. And that was the whole goal, is for people to really hear, experiences and learn from
Yeah.
them and grow from them. So why don't we talk a little bit about you and your childhood and, where you grew up and what was, your childhood like?
It's interesting. I grew up a little bit of everywhere, actually. My father is a nuclear engineer. So we've lived a little bit of everywhere. I was born in California, but I say overall I'm from Tennessee. It's
Okay.
where I went to high school, medical school, and out of every state that I've lived in, I've lived in Tennessee the longest. So basically, I say I'm from Tennessee, but I've definitely lived a little bit of everywhere. I have one brother. My parents are still married and happily so. Um,
Amazing.
so yeah, I think I had some benefits starting early though
Yeah.
in seeing different parts of the country.
Yeah.
And especially with my father being a nuclear engineer, he worked a lot in Europe.
Ah.
And
So did you
so,
travel to Europe frequently with him? Okay.
yes, in fact, spent an entire summer in Sweden one year.
Oh.
But he lived in Stockholm, in Germany for a bit, traveled a lot to Switzerland. So I think, I think travel is so important
Yeah.
because we learn when we see things are different. We learn that not everything has to be a certain way,
Yeah.
and that our friends don't have to look a certain way, and a population or a city doesn't look a certain way. So I'm very fortunate in having a lot of those experiences in a very um, sort of diverse geographical setting at an
Yeah.
early age. And I think it made a difference in kind of how my worldview was formed, knowing, there's a thousand ways to skin a cat. And even in
Yeah.
medicine, right? We talk about
Yeah.
this when
Yeah.
it's, medicine is often like politics. It's local and it's what you teach and that's how you do it at that hospital. And I think that's how we are in life too. When you see things a certain way your whole life, sometimes it's hard to imagine things being different, and that maybe they
Absolutely.
should be different.
Right. That is such an amazing point that you brought up. I think, travel is really a great way of really expanding your horizons, whether it be traveling locally
Right.
within the United States. There are sometimes people that have never left their state or their city.
Yep.
And they only know what they know. And then certainly traveling abroad to different regions of the world, you just, have a world of exposure and growth. It's really about, expanding your horizons, meeting new people. And that's a great point that you brought up. So it's interesting because so many different variables in your childhood kind of helped shape,
Yes.
you and your path.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of seeing different things, traveling, and then also I really love to read.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So I
You're
think,
that avid writer.
yeah, I love to read. I love to write. I was a history major, which is
Amazing.
so not usual. As you know,
That's
for those of us
amazing. So,
in
yeah,
medicine.
so talk to me a little bit about medicine. Like, how did that come into play, especially with your love of reading and writing and history?
Yeah, I come from a family of engineers. My father's a nuclear engineer. Um, and even outside of engineering, I have to say my grandmother actually was a microbiologist,
Oh, wow.
which, yeah, I'm so proud of that on so many levels.
That's amazing.
Being in science, having a job in the 1940s, it wasn't exactly the thing for women to do. Um,
She was the original, breaking
yeah.
boundaries, breaking glass ceilings,
Yes,
that was
no,
her. That's
she
amazing.
really was. And it was always the story that was told is that she wanted to be a physician, but that she was told that women didn't do that.
Wow.
So I've always loved science and
Yeah.
loved learning, and kind of that surgery for me is kind of that perfect mix of engineering, plumbing,
Hmm.
structure.
Yes.
I tell everyone all I do is fix holes. The holes can be anywhere, but the majority of what I do is I fix holes. But, kind of combining that with some of the art of medicine and stories. I mean, that's why I majored in history. I love stories. I love reading. I love learning from them and seeing new things and seeing old things in a new way, from a new
That's
perspective.
amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
And when
Medicine.
did you figure out in college that you wanted to pursue medicine? I mean, did you always think that in high school, or was this
Yeah.
something you were able to intertwine your passions together, through college?
It really started for me in high school with science and biology, and I loved it. And I had this idea I wanted to go to medical school. And actually, it's interesting. I read this book in college about the making of a female surgeon. And this is,
Oh,
this is back in the day.
wow.
This is, pyramid system. So you're an intern and you're not necessarily guaranteed a spot.
Right.
And I was just so enthralled with these stories and the pace. And so I actually specifically went to medical school to do surgery. I wanted to be a surgeon.
That's amazing.
The
That's
trauma
amazing.
part came a little later, but I definitely, yeah, I started and wanted to be a surgeon, basically just off of what I'd read and books, and it just seemed to make sense to me.
That's fantastic. And obviously you had amazing role models between your
Yes.
grandmother, your father, and everybody, and you had that passion and that drive. So it's amazing to see because it's not, as you said, it's not traditional to have, that history, love, and then go into the sciences. But I love your approach to it, and especially with surgery. I love that approach, and the storytelling of medicine, because medicine is really very much about
Yes.
storytelling. So that's fantastic. Now, tell me a little bit about when you met your husband. Was this early on or, later on in your...
So actually, it was in college. We met.
Oh.
I joke all the time. I wish I could say we met in the library, but we didn't. We did not meet at study hall. Um, so no, we actually
That's a
met
story for
out.
the grannies. You can tell them, and the kids. You could be like, "Oh,
Yes,
we were studying hard."
we were studying super hard. actually, it was interesting. We met, we had some mutual friends, and they had just, he played football, and he had just finished a game, and it was out at one of the college bars or whatever. And he asked me out, and I was like, no. I just, I had this set of assumptions about him as a football player at a Division I. They'd won the national championship. It was a whole thing.
Right.
And so I had all these misconceptions about him and football. And so I said no and kind of kept asking. So this was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago this fall, and he likes to remind me how he's always proven me wrong since. So,
it's a good thing to remind you about, right?
Yes.
In a good scenario.
Yes. Definitely likes to remind me when I'm wrong. That's for sure.
Well, 20 years of happy marriage and, children as well. So, it's definitely a win-win scenario in my eyes. So that's perfect. And how was it, when you started dating and, obviously, after, you just told us that initially you had this misconception about him and his role, especially in college, being in sports and, being very good at it. And then slowly, obviously, you learned more about each other. But how was the dynamic and how was your relationship? Was it, smooth and seamless and easy, or did you have like external variables that kind of made it difficult? Like, was it challenging to be together?
It was interesting. He's Black, obviously white, and I didn't think about it. I was very naive going into it. I had dated outside my race before, but I'd never dated a Black man before.
Okay.
And so, I just think I was really naive about it. And then I learned very quickly we would get looks. And I could tell, and I started categorizing them.
Yeah.
And they were really into 3 categories, and those kind of looks really kept going for a while. But one was more of a visual, kind of like because he's 6'6".
Right.
I'm 5'2" on a good day.
Let's not forget about all the heels, okay?
Yeah, if I stretch. And so, just visually, it's a striking sort of visual. So there would be that kind of look, more one out of surprise. And the second one, obviously, he's 6'6". He's obviously athletically built. The second look was more of kind of really focused on him instead of who are you? Like, surely you play football, but kind of like, who are you? And then the third group was one of disapproval. Was one of, that's not okay. And that did start early. That started the moment that we were really off campus. I didn't feel it ever on campus. Yeah. But off campus, at a restaurant, at the movie theater, etc. That's when I first started noticing it.
Did you notice that it was more from a certain age group, or was it just, regardless, you would get these looks from all ages?
It was typically an older set, but I wouldn't say it was just elderly people. I wouldn't say it was people in their 70s and 80s. I would say people from their 30s on up. Wow. And a mixed population of people. And so, I think I very much realized it. I was naive going into it, but then I think I very much realized early on that, this is a thing. Right.
And what about your husband at that time? Was he aware of these looks and reactions as well? And did you guys have these conversations like, and maybe the looks then progressed to another level? Yeah, I don't know if you had any encounters where it carried on, whether it be somebody, that was, waiting tables on you that just was not behaving right, or any other interaction that you might have had.
You know, it's interesting because he was not naive.
Mm-hmm.
And this to
Yeah.
me is the epitome of white privilege.
Yeah.
I went into that relationship or this relationship completely naive that this was going to be an issue
Right.
because I had not suffered discrimination prior to this.
Right.
As a female, a little bit, but even to that extent, I went to an all girls high school.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really until college that I was in even mixed gender scenarios. And I think I had gone through my life without ever really having been discriminated against. And my husband could not say the same.
Right.
So I think my husband very much went into this in a certain extent on the opposite end of the spectrum because he'd already experienced racism and discrimination and being looked down upon and having people look at you and you can feel it off their skin.
Yeah.
I mean, it radiates at times the hatred and the disgust and the disapproval. And I'd never felt that, and he had.
Wow.
And really, that's when my education started into really seeing how a big part of a big percentage, a large number of people in America, what they face every single day.
Wow. It was really your first experience, and kind of through his eyes, you were able to see, what life had probably been like for him. Was there ever a point in your relationship where it got to be too much, where, it was overwhelming? I mean, was there a point where I'm sure you had many conversations, the two of you, and, he probably shared his perspective and, you had better understanding of things, from his eyes. Was there ever a time where he said this may just be too many factors working against us for this to work out? Or did you ever feel that way?
No, I don't think we ever had those moments. I think for him, it was the moments of me being hurt and frustrated, seeing it for the first time, seeing the difference of how I'm treated versus how he's treated right next to each other with people not realizing that we were together.
Yeah.
And also experiencing kind of how we did things. In that when we were going to buy our first home, and I have a crazy schedule, and there were times where it's like, hey, I don't know if I can make this showing, and he would just cancel. It's like, I'm not going to show up at the house by myself. The chances of them even letting him in the door
Wow.
were very different. There are things too where I'll make the phone call because he's like, I already know that when I call, I'm going to get a certain reaction, a certain fear, a certain level of suspicion. So it's kind of this, talk about racism, and it's true. It's really this ugly, horrible snake, and yes, there are horrible, ugly fangs, but then there's this soft underbelly to it,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I said, we walk up together, and then people assume we're not together. People will, we've been at the, like at a cell phone store, and then people are like, oh, okay, and I've got my wedding ring on, we're joint account, and they're like, well, wait, well, what's your last name? What's your last name? Just all these, assumptions of, oh, we're not really together, we're not really married. And it's been those kind of subtleties and learning like, hey, we're going to be driving through a part of the country that really has some overt racism left. So maybe I should drive. It's all those kind of quote unquote little things that add up to tell this story of the fact that he and I live in different worlds.
That's insane, just hearing all of that. And the fact that, I think the important thing in all of this is how, you think that we've come so far. It's 2020, but we really haven't made much progress, which is why so much needs to be done to really, get to a point where things are, allow, like, I mean, we're not even scraping the surface yet, you know,
No.
because clearly, you know, being, you know, educated and coming so many years past our history, you know, you think that people would be accepting and open, but, you know, obviously you're describing experiences where you have to sort of navigate carefully through these crazy scenarios where you never know what kind of reaction, you know, you might get. And, you know, the two of you are kind of deciding which is the best way to kind of, you know, go about things. That's
You know, it's interesting. I will say though, I think the difference right now, but also what gives me hope, is I think the difference is that so many people that have been hurt by this throughout their entire lives, you know, it's a 12-step program. They already know that there's a problem. So they want, you know, they're like, where's step 10? Where's step 11? Like, where are we? And I think for so much of white America, they're at step 1. They're just now realizing how pervasive this is.
right.
And how my children, who the world views as Black, you know, my white friends are just now realizing that I have different conversations with my children, and that I'm going to have different conversations with my children.
Yeah.
Because so many white families don't have any conversations with theirs.
Yeah.
You know, I say all the time is, it's important for us to tell our young women, to tell our girls, you can be anything, you can do anything. But it's also just as important for us to tell our young men and our boys, hey, women can be anything. Women can do anything. And I think similarly here, what I'm seeing that gives me some hope are white families having conversations with their children. Because Black families have always had to have these conversations. It was not a choice.
Right.
It was a choice, which is part of that white privilege, for white families to never have to have these conversations, but now they are. Because I can tell my sons to be as careful as I can. Their parents are a doctor and a lawyer, and it does not matter. Because when my child is 6 foot tall and 15 years old and has a hoodie on, my MD, my husband's JD, does not travel with him. But just as important as I talk to him is I need all the white parents out there to talk to their children, so that when they see my 6 foot, 15-year-old son, that he's not in danger from them. Because I know he's not going to be a danger to anybody else. But the assumption is that he will be. And I'm encouraged by the number of phone calls and messages and emails that I've gotten from my friends and acquaintances who have now realized that as much as they see me and they think that we are alike, they now see that as a parent we're not. And I think the light switch is going off for people. Is it at the pace we want? Absolutely not. Is it absolutely everybody? No, it's not. And yet I'm still encouraged.
Right. And I love hearing that, you know, the positive outlook on things. And I think that's the good thing that is coming out of this, is that the movement, the awareness that is coming. And as you mentioned, you know, your friends, for example, and, you know, white Americans have not had that perspective, you know,
Right.
they have not had to live through, you know, these experiences. So they couldn't even relate to it. And I think that point just that you brought up, you know, just highlights it so well about the conversations that people are having with their children.
Yep.
So many of the people, the friends I have and people that I've had on these shows have spoken, you know, it's unanimous. It's always the same, having those difficult conversations with your children, because you want to be protective and you want them to be prepared. Unfortunately, the world is not a perfect place. And now that there is so much, you know, awareness finally about these situations, I agree with you completely. I think the conversation is shifting where everybody needs to have that conversation, you know, because that's the only way we're going to combat this, is if we work on it together. And I think, you know, I agree with you that that is the hope, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel that we are really hoping for, the change collectively that we can do.
Absolutely. I think it's, once America realizes that this conversation has to happen in every single home and not just one time, that's when we can start really moving forward, because we have to first accept that it's a problem, and having the conversation is an acknowledgement that it is a problem. And that's why I love the term anti-racism. It's not enough to just say, I'm not racist.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging that racism exists and actively working in your job, in your home, in your family to ensure that we address those biases, we address that racism, we talk about it. And racism, it's a verb. It's not a noun. It's an action. And I'm encouraged. I think more people are having conversations these days than have had them in the past, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing point, an analogy that you made with it being a verb and not a noun, is that, actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
So people need to put their money where their mouth is. So it's one thing
Yes.
to say it, to talk about it, but what are you actively doing to make that change, and to make it sustainable? It's not just a one-time thing.
Yes.
You have to change your behaviors, you have to change your patterns, and you have to do something to help, bring about positive change. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your children, your two boys.
Yes.
How old are they?
They are 4 and 8.
Oh, amazing. Oh my God, they must have the best bond between them and the best amount of, well, I guess, love-hate kind of siblings, Typical
No, I
4
mean,
and 8-year-old boys.
no, they do. I mean, it's sweet, actually. Of course, the 4-year-old takes on his role of little brother very seriously. And he loves his Bubba. He loves his big brother. They love each other most of the time. That's all I can really hope for.
Typical for their ages, right?
Yes.
So with everything that's been happening, I know your 4-year-old is young still, and I'm sure prior to all of this, you may not have had, particular conversations with him because he is so young.
Yeah.
But how have things been in your household, with everything that's been happening, with the widespread media coverage? I'm not sure if you had conversations with your 8-year-old before, and have there been a lot of questions from them? Have they been asking you about what's been going on, and, what's been generally the case?
It's interesting because we've had a lot of these conversations a bit organically, in the sense of a lot of it centering around families and how every family looks different.
Yeah.
One of my good friends is married to, it's a woman, and she's married to another woman. But we've talked about it even before that, but in a lot of different ways. And that, well, no two families look alike. You see how her hair is blonde and her husband's hair is dark. Well, my hair is dark and daddy's hair is dark and my skin is light, and your daddy's skin is dark. And so we've talked a lot. We talked about, Ruby Bridges. We try to find other stories, particularly involving African-American children, who my child can relate to and say, oh, well, she went to school, but she was told she couldn't go because of the way her skin looked. So, we've definitely had these conversations before. They have seen some media coverage. Obviously, I try to focus on more of the peaceful, the protests and the marches, and, kind of talk about it. That really, at the end of the day, what this is learning how to care for somebody else. Yeah.
And in their experiences, with just growing up, have they come across, prejudice and racism, whether it be in the school environment, with their friends, with their friends' parents? They come home and tell you that, oh, so-and-so's, so-and-so told me that their parents said that, you and dad were this way, or, something that kind of bothered them, that made them feel, uncomfortable.
It's interesting you bring that up, because literally just about 2 weeks ago was really the first time, and my son didn't recognize it. I did. But we were, at a pool playground area, and some other kids were there, and we were socially distancing. And my kids were just so excited to see other children. They just start, talking and like, well, what's your name and where do you go to school? I mean, they were just so excited, to kind of see other kids. And the kids they were rude and like, we're not going to talk to you. And, you know, they then asked them, do you even live here?
Oh,
Um, and then again, they still didn't get it. And I was kind of
yeah.
getting this sense, you know, like, okay, let me get my kids. Like, you go, why don't you guys come down here and play with me, you know, kind of further
Yeah.
away. And
Right.
my 4-year-old was still talking about his best friend, whose name is Teo. And he's talking about his best friend. Da, da, da. And one of the other kids asked me, he's like, oh, well, is he white?
Wow.
And I was like, and the, I think it was a grandparent actually that was there, but clearly was not paying attention to this. And I was looked at my kids and I was like, don't answer that. We're moving over here. And then I asked him to repeat it. Right? It's one of
Oh,
these things that
yes.
we learn like as adults where I'm like, I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you just say that one more time? And I did it with the point of trying to get the grandparents' attention of,
Mhm.
and he finally then noticed it and interceded. And but it was really the first time, and definitely on the way back to the house, it was like, well, mommy, you know, why did he ask that? Or why did you tell us not to answer that? And, you know, again, it's having these conversations. And I think that's really the hardest part is we
Yeah.
can look through history books. We can talk about the desegregation of schools, and I can pull up other stories of other children and how they were harmed because of prejudice and racism. But it's really hard to talk to your own children, to tell them someone may not like you because of your skin color.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking. If you think as a parent, all of us, I think, no matter the color of your child's skin, all of us can think to those conversations of when a friend was mean to them.
Yeah.
Or they didn't, you know, win first place or something, or just anytime your child is disappointed. And then to take that to a whole nother level and try to explain to a very sweet child that someone may not like them because of the color of their skin, for something that they can do nothing about. It's been the most heartbreaking thing that I've had to and will go through as a parent, is something that is completely out of their control. That no matter what they do, they are not protected from it. The only way that they are protected is if other people protect them.
Exactly. And that's where it's so important that the education starts at a very young age, where, you know, parents are having that conversation, where teachers are having that conversation, where
Yes.
there's interventions on the playground from, you know, teachers and aides, where, you know, we are correcting this, you know, right at the beginning so that it doesn't turn into, you know, centuries of this kind of behavior and hurt. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing these amazing stories. Is there a message you want to share with America?
I think the first thing is just to listen. It's so easy these days for people to just dismiss each other. And I think when someone doesn't look like you and they're describing an experience that you can't wrap your head around or you can't really understand, that's more reason to listen. And I think to take the time to listen to each other, get to know people, and yes, realize it's not enough to not talk about it. And we've got to be an anti-racist. We have to be an anti-racist society. And that acknowledges that racism exists, and that's an action to prevent it and to correct it.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Oh,
thank
thank
you so
you.
much for being here, for sharing your story, and for helping us move forward, you know, hopefully for a better future for future generations to come.
Yes, I have hope. I really do.
Absolutely. We have to be hopeful, you know, we're
Yeah,
going to get through this.
we are. We definitely are. Well,
We're
thank
going
you
to get
again
through
for
the
having me.
pandemic and we're going to get through this.
Oh, don't get me started on COVID. Yes, yes. Well, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here, Jamie. I'll speak to you soon. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.